Hello, hello. Welcome to the Healthy Enterprise Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. If this is a return visit for you, I appreciate you coming back. And if it's your first time, I hope you enjoy today's episode. I'm going to be speaking with Larry Chism. He's an accomplished entrepreneur and senior talent acquisition executive with over 25 years of experience in recruitment, workforce development, and executive search. As a CEO of Qantas Management Resources, he is committed to delivering exceptional service to clients across a range of industries. Larry's career spans global staffing firms and includes a strong track record of sourcing top talent for healthcare systems, biotech startups, and medtech companies while navigating today's competitive hiring landscape. So let's join Larry and have a chat. Welcome to this episode, and looking forward to having a conversation with you. And so, why don't we start by you introducing yourself and telling us about your firm?
Sure. So yes, my name is Larry Chism, and I'm a talent acquisition executive. I've been in the business now for, can't believe it, a little over 25
Time
years.
flies.
Started out basically working. Started out working for a small firm in the South Boston area, and that's kind of how I got my introduction into the business. I used to actually work retail as a manager for Brooks Brothers, and ironically, one of my clients, who was the owner of that firm, recruited me. And so that's how I kind of initially got into recruiting. And so I worked with those gentlemen for a few years, and then basically, my path has been kind of unique. So after that, my wife, now girlfriend, then we had made a decision to move out to the Chicago, Illinois area for family and such, and that was kind of my first stab, if you will, at entrepreneurship. I started out as just a solopreneur, my own practice. I had a small portfolio of about 3 or 4 clients, and basically started out with retail recruiting because most people who enter into that business typically fall into maybe a particular industry that they may have come out of. So if you had a tech background, you probably went into some type of tech-related recruiting and so on. And so I did that for a few years successfully, made some good money, and then 9/11 happened, unfortunately, and we decided that we wanted to come home back to the Boston area. And with that, I did continue some recruiting, but the economy wasn't all that great, and some of my clients had went out of business. But it gave me an opportunity to actually go into another vertical, which is nonprofit. I had worked for United Way as an executive in their Western Mass location doing fundraising, and I tie that in because it gave me a unique exposure into the business world, especially in the financial services and insurance industry. And so when I re-entered recruiting, just think of it as a learning experience that allowed me to kind of look at other bandwidths that I could explore as a recruiter. So I started recruiting higher level people, director level executives, people like that. And then from then on, I grew into contract staffing, which is more of a, for those of you that may be familiar with temp placements and such, I did a lot of that, and worked for a startup firm back in around '08, '09, and worked with them for a couple of years before going back into practice for myself. And since then, I've been doing basically direct hire placement and contract staffing to present. And with that, I've basically recruited a whole range of industries, which I won't go into right now, but it's given me a really good well-rounded exposure to the business, and here I am.
Here you are today. Yes, and you've seen a lot of changes in your industry,
Yes.
particularly in the last 10 years, I would assume. But what do you find today?
Yes.
Currently, what do you find the most interesting or maybe the most challenging part about staffing or recruitment from your perspective than what it was when you started in the industry?
Well, I'll answer the question this way. So, having been in the business as long as I have, I've seen a lot of different shifts. I've seen the emergence of the internet as we know it, the World Wide Web, if you will, and how that affected recruiting as a whole. I've seen the introduction of other resources like social media and how that has impacted. In many cases, in my experience, it has been an addition to the recruiting the way we recruit, the way we identify top talent and such. Now, as of late, the newest thing is artificial intelligence, AI. You hear a lot of that in a lot of different verticals, recruiting, medical, you name it. There's different variations of it out there. But the unique challenge that I'm seeing, Heath, is that I'm coming from the perspective of when I don't want to use an analogy from quote unquote the Flintstones, but back in the dinosaur age when we were using sticks and stones, you know, it was a bit different. Yes, technology was a tool, but you weren't necessarily as reliant on it because it really required a lot of personal face-to-face interactions. With the evolution of technology in our business, and now with the emergence of AI, it's changed the landscape quite a bit. And so right now you have kind of a generation of recruiters that, and this is through no fault of their own. They basically evolved in the business essentially with the resources and tools that they were instructed to use as part of the business. But it's kind of one of those things that you go through where, like, what happens if you lose electricity? Okay, you're so reliant on it. Well, you have to adapt and find other ways to get the job done. Well, if you have never encountered that and then all of a sudden you lose something as basic as that, you're kind of frozen in time. You don't know what to do. Whereas those of us who may have remembered a time when we didn't have electricity, to use that as an example, we kind of know, okay, well, we kind of need to get back to maybe a little old school methodology. So we're not entirely helpless, but what it has done to the field is it's really both, in one aspect, it's made recruiters very dependent on technology, good, but also to a bad sense, because the strangest thing that I have identified, and it's not just my opinion, but we've come out of an economy where it's been fairly steady and such, and but yet the behavior in terms of people trying to find jobs or land opportunities would seem as if we were going through the opposite time, that the economy wasn't that great, that things weren't going that well. And what I found, just my personal opinion, as well as some shared opinions, is that with the emergence of AI and any new technology, until there is a standard um, basis of which to promote that, you're going to have different variations of different quality levels. But unfortunately, that's going to kind of create a backlog, if you will, or even kind of a jam of those that may encounter that and find that, well, wait a minute, I'm putting out 200 or 300 resumes and I'm maybe getting 5 replies. What's going on? And so, not that much different than when the social media came out in terms of the news, traditional news versus social media news and blogs and podcasts and things of that nature, that in its beginning was kind of like the wild, wild west. And so until you get some type of order into that chaos, it's going to be difficult to kind of ascertain, when is this I don't know, maybe experience that we're going through going to taper off into something a bit more predictable, a bit more orderly, that, okay, fine, now we can kind of apply some basic processes and such to navigate or function in this new environment.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up AI already. Yeah, I mean, there's been a variety of advancements over the years. Automation used to be a big concern
Yes.
for people for employment and job, but now that with AI, there's a lot of confusion about, well, who's going to lose their job in this upgrade, and I think what
Yeah.
I've heard is that right now where AI is putting a lot of is being used a lot is in the filtering process of, so resumes are coming in
Hmm.
digitally now through multiple avenues and applications and softwares, and then the information is being vetted and sorted and basically and analyzed by AI, right? And that's the difference
Yes.
right now. We're missing that sort of like, oh, no one's reading these things; it's just being sorted, and then a certain percentage of
Hmm.
them are being
Right.
handed to somebody who's actually going to take the action and communicate directly with that human, right? So how is that?
Right.
Is there how, remember when websites came out and we used to bury keywords in the background where you couldn't see them, but it was a way to trick the algorithms to find your website. Is that kind of stuff going on right now, where it's like, oh, here's a trick to get my resume in front of somebody before the other 199.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And yes, so what many may be hearing is, yes, the utilization of keyword search and trying to make your resume keyword friendly. And in theory, it sounds like it's a reasonable approach, but again, the challenge there is, for example, you can have 100 different opportunities, and you can put your resumes to those different opportunities, but they may have 100 different parameters of keyword search, and so with a keyword search, it has a limited function, a limited capacity. It's not going to tell you everything you need to know. It's going to give you kind of a baseline on what you're looking for, but it's not going to say, okay, yeah, this is the person I want to hire. Let's bring him in, or something along those lines. And that there is kind of the valley, if you will, or that crack, if you will, where the challenge lays. Because I'll give you an example. I have encountered plenty of scenarios, both during my career and even as of late, where I've looked at people, probably initially resumes, and I'd see some things. I may not see everything I need to identify, but maybe enough to just reach out. And had I not applied that initiative of reaching out, I would not have found out that after talking with this person or interacting with this person, oh, there's a whole wealth of information that is applicable to the opportunity that I'm trying to fill. That if I hadn't taken the initiative, this is a person that would have just gone by the wayside. And at the end of the day, what is it that we're really talking about? Trying to find or identify people that are qualified to do the task at hand and do it reasonably well. Okay, but the how can I say, the bottleneck, if you will, to that is, okay, well, they got to get through the keyword search maze first, and I can't tell you how many people I have worked with or have placed that if I had judged them completely on their resume, I wouldn't have even talked to them. And I can tell you some of the best placements, and as an agency recruiter, some of the most lucrative placements I've made have been from people that, after speaking with them, well, I know why your resume doesn't look that great. You're too busy doing the job. You don't have time to build your resume. You don't have time to do the basic things that, yes, one would expect, but you're doing the job. You're getting it done. You're creating the results. You're doing the things that any potential employer would want to identify and bring on to their team. So how do you manage that? Well, this is where the human element comes in. Okay, and I'm not saying, again, there's any one perfect way of doing this. I'm just simply saying there is a distinction between the limitations of AI and what it can do and identify, and then what is left over, if you will, from the rest of the meal that is still good and fresh, but yet for whatever reason ends up in the garbage pail. And so that is where we're at right now. And that's where a lot of people are finding themselves. They're good, solid, credible people that are falling in the cracks of a technology shift that has not been completely perfected yet.
I think that, yeah, you hit it on the head. It's like it's only as smart as it can get, and it's apparently going to get smarter, what we've
Yeah.
understood, but we're still early.
And I'm sorry to dovetail on that, and it's not necessarily a I don't it's not a criticism of my colleagues. It's just in all of us, we are creatures of our own landscape where we come from, and so when you are looking at from agency recruiters or corporate recruiters and such, we all have different, um, how can I say, things that drive us and that maybe prioritize how we go about our job. And so, from a corporate recruiter standpoint, there are different challenges and issues that they encounter that are not the same as an agency recruiter. And so, their challenge is to overcome those obstacles, and get to the heart of the job at hand, which is identify good people, bring them in, and get them through the process. But but if you have evolved in this business more reliant on technological resources rather than maybe intuition and instinct and experience, then you only know what you know. But unfortunately, the collateral damage of that is those individuals that are qualified that can do the job, but for whatever reason, because they don't fall into the keyword recipe, if you will, are unfortunately left behind or left out. And that again is where we're encountering this
Yeah,
problem.
almost could be missed opportunities, right? Or you might lose the fish. The one you want
Exactly.
might actually slip through the cracks, and that's a bit more of that.
That's
It's more of
correct.
a passive approach. You post a job, you receive resumes, and you filter them down, and then you do. Whereas what you were talking about just before that was more deliberate, and what is typically called headhunting, right? Where you're actually looking for the
Yes,
person
yes,
to fill that spot. So, which is
yes,
where you spend more of your
yes.
time, right?
Yes, and actually, and I'm glad you kind of brought into that because headhunting in many ways has evolved over the years. What you will find is the kind of traditional headhunting that I both started the business with back in the '90s, and such, and which is still prevalent in retained search firms and those types of recruiting organizations is with higher level positions or maybe positions with certain specialities, technical skills that are not necessarily commonplace and such, because you can't really identify or bring in quality talent without having done that. And so, especially in certain fields like maybe the legal industry, where you're trying to identify certain attorneys with certain specialities or partners that may have relationships with various companies that other firms may want to bring in as additional books of business or those kinds of things where unfortunately the limitations of technology are going to hit a brick wall and you have to now do the traditional headhunting. You need that interaction with those people. You need to gauge their level of interest. You need to gauge their level of qualifications. Those kinds of interactions that are still to this day are required, that human connection, if you will. But again, that's where you find the traditional headhunting. The more mainstream, I don't want to say automated positions, but positions where the keyword search value, if you will, is more operative, is probably maybe on the junior level, mid level, those kinds of commonplace positions where okay, you can do the volume and not necessarily have the human interaction until maybe literally the final stages of that process where you're close to extending an offer of some sort.
Okay, Larry, you brought up something that I'm curious about. You brought in sort of that sort of junior
Sure.
level recruitment. Fill me in on what's happening because
Hmm.
my understanding is that there's a gap. We've got a fairly large upper management executive uh, population that is in a state of in
Okay.
an exit strategy mode, right? They're ready to retire. They're ready for that succession planning process. And then we've got, university students that are coming in, coming out of school, looking for entry level jobs. And I hear that
Yes.
there's a gap in there somewhere. Where are the gaps right now, and where what kind of solutions do you see fixing that?
So Heath, what you're talking about essentially is attrition. And basically, essentially, you have one group of, let's just say, workers or the workforce that is either on the retirement planning or retiring point of their career, and so naturally, you need the previous group, if you will, to come in and fill in those open slots, and hence, this is how you kind of have the recycling of the workforce, if you will. And to use an example of that, and hopefully it kind of answers your question, is basically the I'll use the FAA. Which is a division of the government. They're responsible for managing air traffic and all air traffic activity throughout the country. And so, here's an organization where you have individuals that may have worked, the field, you know, 25, 30 years, maybe longer, and now they're at the twilight of their career, and so they're looking at retiring and so forth, which is they've earned it naturally, but in order to maintain that kind of activity in terms of making sure that there's no interruption of service or activity, you need to make sure that there is a previous group or generation, if you will, that are in a position to step up and assume those responsibilities and such. So that's kind of the natural flow of any workforce element, just using air traffic control as an example. To go to your question about um, students, college students entering the workforce and that gap. It's a unique challenge right now because you have a lot of different I don't know, forces, if you will, that are kind of intersecting at one point, and they all kind of have their own individual agenda. You have the technology agenda, you have the vacancies that are occurring, issues. You have new, inexperienced, population of individuals or workforce coming into the field, and you kind of have to manage all of these mixtures of multi priorities that are converging. And so, without getting too technical and such, the challenge here is, I guess, and I'll start with on the students entering the workforce is what can we do to map a clear path that allows them to enter the workforce and start, taking some of these, junior level positions, developing their experience and then building obviously their skill sets. And part of that, occurs probably while they're in school, internships, co-ops, those kinds of programs. I mean, they've been traditionally used, so I'm not mentioning anything that's new, but I think in what we're going through right now, they become even more valuable, especially when you're dealing with a workforce that has limited or no experience. How do you get them through the door? Combined with this AI mechanism that is sifting through qualified, or what they would say unqualified people and such, and doing its own thing. And it's going to have to be a combination of those items that I mentioned before, and some things that maybe the younger generation may not be accustomed to doing. That, what's that old adage? What's old is new again. You may have them having to reach out and talk to people. I know many years ago, I used to encourage or recommend people go on informational interviews. It's a great way to kind of get yourself out there talking to people. There are a lot of professionals out there that will make time actually to talk to individuals. And sometimes in those conversations, you never know what may emerge. What you do have happening is a direct interaction between one person and another. And sometimes, the conversation may take a life of its own, and it could materialize into an opportunity or a referral. Maybe they know somebody. I've just spoken to maybe this intelligent individual that seems to have a lot of promise. I don't have anything for them, but hey, Joe or Mary, you might have something in your division. Here's their name and so forth and so on. So it's going to be a combination of all these different things that the new generation, if you will, coming into the workforce are going to have to apply or deploy as part of their efforts. If they're looking at putting their eggs all in one basket, which is totally communicating through the technology apparatus, they're going to experience limited success, and that can be frustrating. And so, in order to really, give themselves, or I should say widen the net, if you will, they're going to have to deploy all of these things, the skills and technology that they're accustomed to utilizing, but things that they may not be accustomed to doing, which is actually picking up the phone and calling people, reaching out to people. It's a little bit easier to get access to information now than maybe 20 or 30 years ago with the emergence of the search engines like Google and Bing and so forth, because you can access or you can identify stakeholders or hiring managers. LinkedIn is a great apparatus to that. So maybe you want to get a job at XYZ company and you want to know who to talk to. Maybe there's an engineering manager. Well, you punch up a title and see who comes up as a name. You might have a bunch of names, but reach out to them. Hey, do a connect request, and then after that, maybe start a conversation. Hey, my name is so and so. I'm a recent grad. I'm trying to identify opportunities. Looking for some advice. That's probably a great way to start, and you never know where that will lead. And you have maybe 10 or 20 or more of those kinds of communication interactions during the course of a week and so on. Something is bound to materialize. So that's kind of, I guess, my broad stroke initiative in terms of different ways to be creative, to put yourself out there, be seen, be known, while simultaneously trying to get yourself positioned to opportunities that might otherwise not become available unless you do those things.
I think that's awesome advice because when and when LinkedIn, for just as an example,
Sure.
it levels the playing field because you actually have access to executives, CEOs, COOs, CMOs.
Yes.
The whole executive suite is
Hmm.
accessible. Whereas 30 years ago, you wouldn't even get as close to the door of their office, right? Whereas now
Exactly.
this is an opportunity to actually introduce yourself and say, "Hey, I want to work for your company." And
Sure.
I've heard that doesn't happen a lot, and the ones that do make that connection get noticed.
That's correct. And it's a very basic but yet simple way of standing out.
Yeah, yeah. So your company, your firm, Qantas Management Resources,
Yes.
where do you like to spend most of your time? What's your sweet spot as far as that in the big picture?
Sure. So so I guess from an overall point of view, basically, what I do in totality is I provide obviously talent acquisition services to businesses. I provide what I would call, I guess, career coaching or counseling services to individuals, and the rest is kind of a mixture of both, probably more on a consulting side, especially with those new businesses that may be on the startup side that are looking for expertise or counsel or advice, and that's kind of maybe the third area that I provide service in terms of my sweet spot. Like everyone else, I mean, hey, you kind of have to make a living, so much of my activity is focused towards servicing clients naturally. I deal with a wide range of clients representing different industries, from financial services to biotech, pharma to retail. Again, it depends on what the demands are and such. Much of my activity has of late been dealing in the medical services, as well as, ironically, tech slash security clearance, sensitive roles like that. Um, but in essence, it's I find really a special kind of enjoyment in being able to help individuals, especially those that may be encountering different challenges or struggles. I mean, it could be maybe the senior professional that wants to reenter the workforce, but maybe they're encountering some, I don't know, difficulty in reasserting themselves into a different work landscape. There could be issues there. It could be the new individual that just recently graduated college, and they're trying to get into the workforce, but they're not exactly sure what is the right or most effective path to do that. And then you have those that are kind of in between, that may be either transitioning to or wanting to transition to other types of careers. Maybe they were an engineering manager for most of their career, and now they want to go into something completely different, and they're trying to wonder, well, how can I transition into that without necessarily maybe disrupting my I guess my way of life. Translate in simple terms, my financial viability. I mean, there are, again, uh, things that you kind of are you evolve in, especially if you spend a lot of time within a particular industry or setting. You generate a certain level of seniority and compensation that kind of goes with that. And so when you're looking at transitioning into another career, these are the things that you need to take into consideration. So again, those kinds of issues, again, dealing with individuals, I find both uniquely challenging but gratifying if I'm able to at least provide some type of constructive counsel that allows them to achieve their goals, short term, long term, or otherwise.
And does that include, do you do work a little bit with succession planning, helping people
Yes. So
replace
yes,
themselves
succession
in
planning
so
can
to
be
speak?
a part of that. Some of that could be contingent upon, you know, actually small businesses, business owners that may be looking to sell their business. Now, that's not an area of particular expertise that I have. However, there are professions that I deal with or have dealt with on a one-on-one basis that are trying to determine what is the best approach or way to maybe address that issue or that priority, and what are some things that I need to be aware of if I want to, engage in that kind of activity. That could be something that I can talk to. Again, that's kind of a case by case situation, depending on what I
Sure.
encounter.
Any other challenges that you're experiencing or you're seeing in your industry as far as, well, I mean, maybe let's focus on the healthcare industry.
Sure.
What particular challenges are you seeing there right now in staffing?
So that's actually that's a great question because there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of I've spoken to a lot of healthcare professionals of various industries that can probably write a book on their individual experiences as to some of the challenges that
Yeah,
they're going through. But to kind of compress that a little bit into maybe a couple different areas. Obviously, not necessarily to so much tie into that, but again, keep in mind, we've just gone through as a society, I guess, if you will, as a culture, COVID. That this was something that occurred. That again. Pre-COVID, no one really could have foreseen something of this magnitude, but clearly, when it was, when we were all going through it, the medical industry, literally was kind of at the front lines of this. And so,
yeah,
many people have, their own both personal stories, either directly or indirectly, of people that they know of and challenges that they had gone through. And it also tested our institutions in the context of best practices or basic practices that maybe needed to be reevaluated as it relates to that. Um, what I'm finding now, as probably the more recent conversations, is at least from a talent acquisition standpoint, is again identifying those individuals that, well, one that are still highly motivated and passionate about remaining in the healthcare field, because there are different arms of it that are going through different challenges. Quite frankly, some of it political, some of it just pragmatic. It's just these are the things that the industry as a whole is constantly being tested or having to kind of go through these tectonic shifts and such. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual, whether you're a, uh, a director of surgical care services or an administrator of some type or a physician of some specialty. It all comes down to the basic core of, are you passionate about wanting to enter this field? And are you passionate about the pros and cons of it? And I can't say that I can give you a clear one way or the other, but I can say that that is definitely an important factor as I identify talent, especially talent that may be looking to either transition, maybe location. Maybe they're moving from California and they're looking to move to maybe Virginia, which is one coast to the other. There are different aspects that they have to consider, and this is where you kind of put the test, if you will, of do they still want to remain in this field for regardless of what they may have encountered and have gone through. So the only way I can probably answer that is that is a continually evolving thing, but the newest element that has emerged in this has been obviously the aftermath of COVID, maybe some of the political aspects that have been in the forefront of the healthcare medical field, and just again the basic challenges that the field has always undergone, whether it be through technology or just cultural shifts and best practices, but all these things converging at once. Um, it creates again those continual challenges that I can't tell you if there's an ending to it, but the only thing I can say is that it's something that I've seen more of a factor in what I do as a recruiter that needs to be considered than maybe in the past, where maybe there were other issues. Maybe it was more related to compensation and is this a particular area that I want to work for? Now it's a quality of life issue, quality of life element that is more of a factor. Based on some of the examples that I provided to you a moment ago, and others that have really been kind of the stress tester in how the healthcare industry as a whole is undergoing and dealing with the challenges that it's facing.
Yeah, and there's a tremendous amount of growth in innovation and
Mm.
technology and
Yes,
advancements, and and I'm hearing a lot about. It's great you brought up quality of life too,
yes,
and the balance of life, because there's a lot of opportunities now in from a fractional management standpoint,
yes,
where
yes. You see a lot of
particularly
that
in
coming up.
startups where they can't, yeah, they can't afford, a full-time uh executive, so they
Yes,
offer a fractional opportunity, which actually speaks to that life balance. They don't want to work 7 days a week, they want to work 3 days a week, so it's a
yes.
perfect opportunity.
Yes, and that's an area that it's a great adaptation that in many ways cuts both ways. From the individual that is looking to balance their quality of life, there are a lot of advantages to that. To the employer or institutional organization that is looking to tap into that talent, but may have budget constraints and such. So it's kind of like it's a healthy compromise that allows both the retention of needed services while simultaneously factoring in on the other side the quality of life elements that people have or are looking to enjoy or maybe not compromise. And I'll tie that into COVID, just another example as well, because with the experience of working remotely versus now you see a kind of a momentum going back to the office. It's never going to be quite the same. And part of that isn't so much as the okay, well, there are those that are looking to bring people back to work for various reasons or what have you. But I will talk from a singular standpoint, from the individual that may have been accustomed to that long commute into the city for a job of some sort. But then, here comes COVID. Now they're working remotely, but then all of a sudden they realize, oh, wait a minute, why am I seeing extra money in my pocket, per week, per month? Oh, that's right, I'm not buying a commuter rail pass, or I'm not spending on gas or some type of expense to get me to work. And so now they're seeing a greater net income, coming into them, and there's a benefit to that. Or the other side, the employer that's simply saying, well, I don't need to rent all this office space now. And so that, tends to have a budget friendly aspect to it. So again, each company is kind of, weighing in on a case by case basis what is best for them. But as a whole, this is something that has played into, again, what has been the evolution of workforce climate, options that are available to both individuals and organizations as it relates to accessing talent and ultimately achieving their individual goals.
It's such an interesting industry. There's so many, it's a giant onion too. There's so many layers and so
Right.
many ways that it's impacted. It's very interesting. I really enjoyed hearing it from your perspective, and I mean, we already blew through 45 minutes, and we barely scratched the surface.
Forgot all about the
So
technical issues. That's great.
yeah, it was a success. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. If someone is hearing this and they're looking for coaching or looking for some advice, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Sure. I'm obviously you can reach me on LinkedIn, uh, Larry Chism. Uh, not too many of us out there, but we'll see. But or you can type up my company name, Quantus Management Resources. That's QUANTUS Management Resources. And then the other ways are traditional. You can reach me at 508-289-1620. That's my direct line, or my direct email.
Okay. And the website is
Yes, it's QMR Consultants with an S.com. And all the contact information that you need to get a hold of me is right on there as well.
excellent. Did we leave anything off that you wanted to mention today?
No, other than to simply say that, and as a general theme, that to those individuals that may hear this, I can understand and appreciate that sometimes the challenge, whatever it may be, whether it's finding a job or generating business or whatever that may be, sometimes it feels like you may be running on empty. But don't be surprised that there may be more left in the gas tank than you realize, and that's kind of I think a theme that I try to promote, both for myself and anyone that I talk to, because we are going through a unique time for a lot of different reasons. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to each of us trying to identify ways that we can both reach our personal best and our personal goals. And I found that maintaining a positive, constructive attitude and knowing that anything is achievable as long as you're willing to commit the time, effort, everything else will take care of itself from there.
Words of hope. Great place to end. Thank you so much, Larry.
All right. Well, Heath, thank you very much for the time. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thanks for joining me today. We'll talk again.
Okay, great. Take care now.
All right, that's a wrap on today's episode. Big thanks to Larry for joining us and bringing such clarity to the complex world of modern recruitment. From the rise of the AI and resume screening to the irreplaceable value of that human connection. And the reminder that great hiring isn't about algorithms. It's about people and timing and trust. So whether you're a recruiter navigating and looking at new tools, or a job seeker just trying to break through, you could also be a leader facing workforce gaps. There's a lot to take away from this conversation. And as Larry pointed out, while the landscape may be shifting, the fundamentals like networking and mentorship and just showing up with intention hold really true. So thanks for listening. And if you found this episode valuable, please consider sharing it with a colleague and subscribe so you can get an update on the next one. So until next time, keep learning and keep growing. Thanks for listening.